Hello students, let's revise chapter 4, the Central Islamic lands, with a special focus on objective type of questions. So first thing, what are the sources from where we get the information about the Central Islamic lands, which is a time period between 600 to 1200. The first is the chronicles, which are also called Tawarik, and these are narrating events in order of time. They can be either semi-historical or biographies, also records of sayings of the Prophet and commentaries on the Quran. There were also eyewitness reports called Akbar. These were transmitted over a period of time, either orally or on paper. The authenticity of each report, that is a khabar, was tested by a critical method, and this established the reliability of the narrator. What is Aramaic? It's a language related to Hebrew and Arabic, and it's also been used in Ashokan inscriptions. The origin of Islam. So this happened during 612 to 632. The Prophet Muhammad preached the worship of a single God, that's Allah, and the membership of a single community of believers, that's Ummah. This was the origin of Islam. What were the tribes called? Qabila. A little bit about the Arab tribes. They were nomadic, they were Bedouins. They moved from dry to green areas. The green areas in a desert were called oases. They went in search of food, mainly dates, and fodder for their camels. Some of them settled in cities and practiced trade and culture. The significance of Mecca. Mecca was located on the crossroads of a trade route between Yemen and Syria. This enhanced the city's importance. Also, there were tribes that considered Mecca, the Kaaba in Mecca, they consider it holy. When did Muhammad declare himself to be the messenger or the Rasul of God? Around 612. This could be a picture-based question where you have the Archangel Jibril who brought messages to Muhammad. Who were the Muslims? Those who accepted the doctrine which Prophet Muhammad gave were called Muslims. What was the turning point in the history of Islam? It was the fact that in 622, the Prophet Muhammad was forced to migrate with his followers to Medina. This could be a source-based question, the Islamic calendar. Pay attention to the different ways in which it differs from the Gregorian calendar. What happened after Prophet Muhammad's death and the beginning of the Caliphate? So after Prophet Muhammad's death in 632, no one could legitimately claim to be the next prophet of Islam. Hence, his political authority was transferred to the Ummah with no established principle of succession. Then we have the 4 caliphs, okay, which are as follows: Abu Bakr, who suppressed revolts; Umar, who took in his under his rule He wanted the expansion of power. Then we have the third Caliph, Uthman, who took control of Central Asia. And finally, you have the fourth Caliph, who is famous for the Battle of the Camel. The Byzantine and the Sasanian empires. The Byzantine Empire promoted Christianity. The Sasanian Empire patronized Zoroastrianism, which is an ancient religion of Iran. We have a map question. The Islamic lands here, and pay attention to the seas, the Gulf, all the water bodies. So you have the rivers, the cities, Baghdad, you have Basra, all the important cities are here, Cairo, Fustat, Medina, Mecca, you have Aden here, Siraf, Samarra, Aleppo, Antioch, Damascus, Alexandria. Muawiyah, who was Muawiyah? He was the first Umayyad Caliph. He moved his capital to Damascus. He adopted court ceremonies and administrative institutions of the Byzantine Empire and introduced hereditary succession. The Umayyad state was now an imperial power. It was no longer based directly on Islam, but on statecraft and the loyalty of the Syrian troops. There were Christian advisors in the administration as well as Zoroastrian scribes and bureaucrats. This could be a source-based question on Abd al-Malik and his successors. Okay, the picture-based question also could be this, his coinage reform. So you have the three coins here, the Byzantine gold solidus, you have the gold dinar struck by Abd al-Malik with his name and his image, and then later on the reformed dinar where there is no image but a kalima. There is no God but Allah and he has no partner. Another picture-based question, the Dome of the Rock. Who were the Abbasids? They were a family of Meccan origin. Another picture-based question, the Great Mosque of Al-Mutawakkil in Samarra, which was the second Abbasid capital. And the Abbasids were descendants of Abbas, the Prophet's uncle. And they were the ones who established their capital at Baghdad. So if you have to remember about the Abbasids, they were a family of Meccan origin. They replaced the Umayyads in 750. They were the descendants of Abbas, the Prophet's uncle, and established the capital at Baghdad. Weakening of the Abbasid state. From the 9th century, the Abbasid state became weaker because Baghdad's control over distant provinces declined, and because of the conflict between pro-Arab and pro-Iranian factions in the army and bureaucracy. So there was a civil war that broke out in 810. Now, besides the Arabs and the Iranians, there was a third ethnic group, which were the Turks. And this came with the rise of the Turkish sultanates in the 10th and 11th century. They were the nomadic tribes from Central Asian steppes, that's the grasslands of Turkestan, and they gradually converted to Islam. These were skilled riders and warriors. They entered Abbasid, Samanid, and Bayid as slaves and soldiers, and then they rose to high positions on account of their loyalty and military abilities. Then you have the three crusades. The Christians were called the people of the book. They were regarded by the people of the book by the medieval Islamic societies, since they had their own scripture, which was the New Testament. So the first crusade was between 1098 to 1099. Here, soldiers from France and Italy captured Antioch in Syria and claimed Jerusalem. The Second Crusade was between 1145 to 1149, and here a combined German and French army made an attempt to capture Damascus, but they were defeated and forced to return home. And the Third Crusade was after Jerusalem was lost. This happened in 1189, but the Crusaders did not gain much except for some coastal towns in Palestine and free access to Jerusalem for Christian pilgrims. The Franks in Syria can be asked as a source-based question. Tax divisions. So, agricultural land was controlled by the state, and the state derived its income from land revenue. The lands that were conquered by Arabs, which remained in the hands of the owners, were subject to a tax called kharaj, and this varied from half to a fifth of the produce according to the conditions of the cultivation. On the other hand, land that was held or cultivated by Muslims, here the tax levied was 1/10 of the produce. So, non-Muslims started converting to Islam to pay lower taxes. This created a shortfall, and the caliphs then adopted a uniform policy of taxation. Which were the agricultural advancements? So you had irrigation systems right throughout the Nile Valley. You had peasant initiatives and state support. Cultivable land was expanded. Provisions were given to people who wanted to cultivate land. Productivity rose. So new crops such as cotton, oranges, bananas, watermelons, spinach, and brinjals were grown and exported to Europe. The Arabic name for Egypt is Misr. The garrison cities were Kufa and Basra in Iraq, Fustat and Cairo in Egypt. The older towns were Damascus, Isfahan, and Samarkand. Two building complexes which formed the radial focus of every city and were at the heart of the city were Congregational Mosque and the central marketplace. So these were the centers of cultural and economic power. Another source-based question: paper, Geniza records, and history. What were the economic prohibitions that were put on the Muslims? So you have here no taking of interest as commission on currency exchange and other such things. There were some literary contributions. One of that is The 1001 Nights, Alf Layla. This is another picture-based question of the Madrasa of Baghdad. Who were the Sufis? They were a group of religious-minded people who sought a deeper and more personal knowledge of God through asceticism. That's Rabbaniya and mysticism. This is a source-based picture or picture-based question could come of the whirling dervishes. Pantheism is the oneness of God and His creation, which implies that the human soul must be united with its maker. So it's a personal relationship with God. Science and philosophy during this time, this was developed by Islamic philosophers and scientists under the influence of Greek philosophy and science. This happened during the 7th century, and the remnants of late Greek culture could still be found in the Byzantine and Sasanian empires. The impact of translation of books, especially in the schools of Alexandria, Syria, and Mesopotamia. So this impact of translation was that the works of Aristotle, Euclid, Ptolemy were brought to the attention of Arabic reading scholars. Even Indian works on astronomy, mathematics, and medicine were translated into Arabic, and these works reached Europe and kindled interest in philosophy and science. A source-based question could be asked on the ideal student. Then some important writings, the Canon of Medicine. It's a 1,000,000-word manuscript that lists 750 drugs sold by the pharmacists of the day, and it was written by Ibn Sina. Much appreciated qualities of a person during that time in medieval Islamic societies was that he should have fine language and a creative imagination. These qualities raised a person's to adab. Adab would mean literary and cultural refinement. So we have different forms of poetry as forms of expressions or other forms of expressions. Pahlavi is the language of sacred books of ancient Iran, and New Persian, which is a version of Pahlavi, was then developed with a huge Arabic vocabulary. Now, who's the father of New Persian poetry? It's poet Rodaki, who is considered as the father of New Persian poetry, and this New Persian poetry included new forms such as the short lyrical poem or the ghazal and the quatrain, the rubai. The Shahnameh is an outstanding book by Firdausi, who took for 30 years to complete this book. It's an epic of 50,000 couplets. This has become a masterpiece of Islamic literature. It's a collection of traditions and legends, and the most popular being that of Rustam. So what did this writing, or what is the scope of adab? It included biographies, manuals of ethics, mirrors for princes, and history. Also geography. Architecture was different during this time. And in the first Islamic century, the mosque had a distinct architectural form which could be identified by people very, very clearly. So it had a roof supported by pillars. It had an open courtyard with a fountain or a pond that was placed, and there was a dome. So this could be a picture-based question. This is the picture here, how calligraphy was a form of art that was developed at the time. Now, time was marked in cities and villages by the 5 daily prayers and weekly sermons. The construction of the mosque, the architectural pattern was used even in caravanserais, hospitals, and palaces. And the Umayyads built desert palaces in oases. Islam promoted two forms of art, calligraphy and arabesque, because they rejected the representing of living beings in the religious art, and hence they used calligraphy, that's beautiful writing, and arabesque, which is geometric or vegetal designs. So which are the three aspects of human civilization that the history of Central Islamic lands brings together? It's religion, community, and politics. And with that, we end a very brief summary of this chapter.